Yeah. So this session is, I'm start to also recording this session, and welcome Alina, and thank you, and over to you now.
Thank you, Nitin. Uh, Welcome to, okay, I can't see faces, so when I look at screens, I don't know what to say. I'm going to look at Nitin and speak. So welcome to a nice, refreshing way of learning. My name, Alina Mennon. I have been in the field of coaching and coach training for quite some time now. Besides being a practicing coach, I also train individuals to become coaches at the ACC level and at the PCC level. I mentor them also at the ACC level and PCC level. This program that I am doing now is something that I teach at the PCC level, which is just to tell you that it's a slightly higher level of the same competencies. As you know, the beautiful thing about the ICF competencies is that the competencies remain the same. The depth, the breadth of how you are demonstrating that competency changes, which means that how can you demonstrate the same competencies, whether it is coaching, presence, active listening, whatever it may be, at a greater depth and at a place where it is beyond the obvious, is what happens at a PCC level. So the topic today is also something that is that all of us as coaches encounter when we are coaching our clients. You would all agree that the role of a coach is to stay objective, to not judge, to not interpret what the client is saying, and use your coaching as a mirror to be able to show the objective reality to the client. Now, that's easier said than done because we are human beings, and when we hear something, our mind naturally processes, it reinterprets, and then represents. Or even if it doesn't represent, our mind processes it a certain way. And often, unknowingly, the coach is bringing their own perception into the conversation, unknowingly. So this concept that I'm talking about really helps you to maintain that objectivity. Another concept that you know is that coaching is a language skill. So language of the coach and of the client. What I mean is that when the client tells his story, he makes sense of his story by using certain types of words, certain way in which he speaks, and that is an indicator of how he's thinking. We as coaches make observations. I may use the word observations, but actually is the listening. Yeah, we don't really go on to a basic concept like body language. We go to a higher level where we actually are listening for words, what is being said, what is not being said, and how it is being said. So the language that our client uses is our only raw material, which you kind of massage and then present back to the client. So that raw material needs to help us to make the client's mind expand. That's the job of the coach, to expand the client's mind, to be able to make him see it from a perspective which is different from the current perspective that he is looking at. And the session today, where we are talking of using the client's language, is using or working with the client's metaphors and this unique technique called plain language. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to go off video, and I'm going to put my I'm going to share screen. Yeah, like Nitin just said, please put your queries on the chat box, and I'm absolutely fine if you feel that I have not addressed your queries and you want to shout out. There's absolutely no problem. You can interrupt, because if there's a thought in your mind, it doesn't make sense for me to still go ahead with my thought without really addressing yours. So say, Alina, stop, tell me what you just said doesn't make sense. And I will definitely try to answer. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to now share screen. Okay, so working with metaphors and clean language. So let me just play around with the screen here. Yeah, here you go. So, welcome to the world of language. While I know that you know what is a metaphor, but I'd still want you to share with me that when, how do you experience the client using a metaphor in the way they tell their story? Is there anything on the chat? No. Is there anything on the chat? Oh, yeah.
Alina, I want to share. Aniruddha here.
Yes, 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 please, please, please.
I would like to capture an incident yesterday evening when I had a client with me, and he was referring to the challenge that he was facing at his workplace. Uh, he is working on a project wherein he has competence on initial 25% of project.
Mm-hmm.
Then the later part where his core competence comes in.
Right.
Later 50% he was talking about some copy paste, which is grunt work, and the
Mm-hmm.
last part of the project is 25% where his domain experience or knowledge doesn't exist. So he
Mm-hmm.
was referring to painting house
Okay.
was something he talked about, and he said that I know that there is a house and my job is to paint it.
Okay.
Where he said, I do not have competence or any awareness about what this house is all about. My job is only to paint. So creative work.
Okay. Okay.
So something like that he was talking about.
That's nice. That's a good one. Yeah, and there are some very nice ones that's come here. Clients often use these kind of metaphors: swimming in an endless sea, or feel like a dry plant. Yeah, I completely agree with what Venkat Narayan has said, that when they are unable to express their emotions, when the client finds it tough to articulate, is when you know yeah, they use a metaphor. So absolutely right. So metaphor is using an imagery to represent his thoughts and feelings. Uh, our our spoken language and often even written language is full of metaphors. Now, the unique thing about when our client uses metaphor is that it is not deliberately created like a poet or a writer would actually think and create a metaphor. The client uses the metaphor in a very natural way in which he is expressing. They already, this metaphor already exists in his mind and he's just discovering them. It is always an internalized one. And like Mr. Venkatraman said, that when the mind is challenged and is trying to make sense of an experience, it uses a metaphor. Similarly, we are talking of clean language. Now, clean language is a tool with which a coach can use with this client's content. It's a strategy to understand what is the symbolic meaning that the client is using, which is like, my feeling compared to a dry plant, or my swimming or moving ahead and the sea seems to be endless, which may mean that the task seems to be endless. So there is a symbolism in the metaphor, and the client is in a complex set of thoughts, feelings, and is unable to make coherent sense of it. And that's when your questions guide you to kind of find the relationship that is there of these two things that he is comparing, and then help him to obviously facilitate his discovery. Yeah. So well said. Let's move to the next piece. Yeah. So role of metaphor in opening the mind. We as human beings are natural metaphor makers. Uh, a change in a metaphor can lead to a change in self. That is the basic premise by which a coach decides to work with a metaphor. Two types of metaphors: uh, overt metaphor, the ones that are easily identifiable. The client um, actually says it so straight that you can quickly pick it up. The one which is a little difficult is the one which is embedded in the very fabric of our sentence, and often gets passed as unnoticed because it gets heard as normal English. Yeah, like I have to push myself. Now I have to push myself is not very not a direct explicit metaphor. Push myself is something that we use, but push here is a metaphor. Or I need to feel connected is also an embedded metaphor there. Or I struggle, these are words which are so easily used in our English language. Coaching presence, or for that matter active listening, is about being able to identify this metaphor. Like I said, metaphors are the fundamental way that humans think. The client is trying to describe the intangible that's going on in his head. That's his inner thought, and he's trying to conceptualize it. Uh, Obviously, this means that it is stored in his subconscious, and this metaphor that he's using is like a neural pathway that connects the experiences, actions, thoughts, feelings. Hence, uh, this metaphor holds a whole lot of layers and layers of meaning inside it. So let's not let it pass. Let's not say that, oh, I need to listen, so I need to let him be. I was doing a session for the Chennai chapter when somebody said, but isn't it about not stopping the client when he's telling the story by talking to him about, asking him about the metaphor? But yes, of course, you need to listen to the story, and if he's in a venting mode, you need to let him go. But the point is that this is not just about venting. It's about finding a window for him to look inside. The client is telling the story. The coach is not listening to the story because I find it interesting. It's a great piece of story. I am listening because I want to get a window to his mind for him to expand his mind. And therefore, just letting him talk, and therefore letting a beautiful metaphor pass by, is letting go of an opportunity for him to be coached, and for you as a coach to be able to help him to make sense of something that is at the moment in a fuzzy manner. So we need to train our minds to listen keenly when there is a metaphor being used, even if it is a overt, even if it is an embedded metaphor. So let's look at let's look at some metaphors, and then we will move on to the next concept, which is clean language. So here's a simple statement. I'm in a dilemma. I seem to be swinging like a pendulum on both sides. So my request to you is that if that's a statement that has come from the client, what is it that you will say to your client? Okay, there are on the chat. What is that like? Okay, what is the dilemma about? What is it like to swing like a pendulum? Okay, any more? Okay, yes. How far are you swinging? Okay. What makes you think so? Can you see the difference between the two sides? What is the frequency? What is swinging like a pendulum look like for you? Good, great. There is no one way to coach. There are many ways to approach coaching, and I'm going to share with you my philosophy. At Coach Masters Academy, we have a certain way in which we coach. We have a framework by which we coach, and we have a certain philosophy. And I'm going to share that philosophy here with you. So, when the client expresses this metaphor, one of the things that we as coaches do not want to do is to get the client to analyze it. So, which means that uh, talking about the two sides is actually talking about the situation. So he says, at one side there is this attractive job which is calling to me, and that another side is this company which has really stood by me for so many years, and I need to be here. So what you are sharing, what the client is sharing is actually a little bit of the situational context. And sometimes when we all coaches know that when the client starts sharing situational context, you kind of say, okay, that's the situation, that's the story. Can you rise above the story? I want to see the who. I want to see the you in the story. So sometimes instead of asking the question around what is the difference between the two sides, or what is there on the two sides, or what does each side mean, like what does loyalty to this company mean to you, and what does that attractive job mean to you, is only asking for situational. How about you go directly into the client's experience? So we work with the client's experience. The client is experiencing left side and right side of the pendulum. How about if you say, and I wonder which side is your preference? So I am expanding the client's mind. I really don't need to know what the two sides are. I don't need to explain. So which side is your preference? So let him say, most of the time my mind is going back to my current organizations, and I feel that I owe it to them. So there, the client's experience is coming out. We've moved forward. So the philosophy here that I'm talking about is work with the client's experience, number one. Second is move towards the possible and positive instead of explaining the negativities of the two sides, and moving the client to start talking about his desire. So when you say what's a preference, he's talking, you're moved into desire. Or maybe even something like, if you had a choice, how would you like this pendulum to be? So I am talking of it moving from left to right, and it's really paining me that it's moving left to right, left to right. I wish the pendulum was either stationary in the center or just towards the left hand side. And that would have been my compass. Anything can come out. So the question is coming from a space of, how would you like this pendulum to be? Or a similar one, say, if you could stop this swinging, in which direction would you start? All questions leading to understand the client's mind. Yeah, that's when the client starts talking about what is it that the client wants to explore. In coaching, in Coach Masters Academy, we are constantly exploring the positive, the possible, and the client's expression of desire. Where is it that the client would like to go? This expression of desire obviously comes from values, beliefs, embedded thoughts, and a whole lot of things.
But isn't that the whole dilemma itself? Why this client is not able to decide which side to swing. If you are asking him a direct question, that's the whole dilemma about.
Yeah, so you're solving it. You're helping him solve it by first asking him which direction, how would he like it to be? When he says that, my mind keeps going back to this loyalty, and I keep thinking I must, stay with this company. So, okay, sounds like the loyalty that you have towards this company is making this decision difficult. And what is it? Sounds like this the loyalty that you have is making this decision difficult. And what are your thoughts as you are trying to work around this loyalty? So you are only inviting thoughts. What more? What matters most? And when you say loyalty, What does that mean to you at this point of time? And what is it that's making this choice so difficult? So that's where the mind, you are working with the mind. You are not asking him anything about the situation. So that's my philosophy. I have complete respect for all the all the approaches that y'all have all put there. I'm just teaching you mine because I have come here to talk about that. Yeah, let's look at the next one. The next one here is time is money, and I'm losing it by the day. Please feel free to share. Like I said, I'm just giving you a different perspective. Then you as a coach have a choice whether you want to try my perspective and your perspective and many other ways. So don't worry. Please tell me. Time is money and I'm losing it by the day. Oh, so what does losing look like? Okay. Mm, sure. What does losing look like? Uh, I kind of try to stay away from uh, inviting the client to share the negative, but that's fine. Yeah, what will make you gain? So instead of the frame of the client is in a loss frame, losing is a loss frame. Can we make it into a gain frame? That takes the mind into positivity. Otherwise, the client is expanding on the negative, and when the client expands on the negative, the mind goes into a toxic state, and then it's kind of difficult. It's not uh, impossible. It's difficult to get him back into a positive. So the minute you say, okay, you're losing it, and what would help to gain it, then you're saying that it kind of starts moving into a direction of finding solutions. Finally, we have to get him into a solution searching mode rather than going on talking about the negative. So what would make you save rather than how much, because how much is a number, it's a closed question. So what would what needs to happen for you to start saving? Or yeah, like what Jill has put here, what would you like to see happening instead? Absolutely, absolutely. Those are the ways in which you can move into positive and possible. So you using the metaphor, but you are staying away from the negative, because you will notice 9 out of 10 times that metaphors are stated in the negative. The client expresses a metaphor because he is in a challenge state, and therefore he is using a metaphor to say, I feel like a dry plant and I feel stuck, and etc etc. So most of the time it would be negative. So we do not want the mind to go into further negative for him to explain what it is. Like, I'm stuck in a cave, and if you ask him, okay, how dark is this cave, uh, you're really only re-emphasizing the negative. You'd rather say, and what needs to happen for you to find light, or what is it that you need to understand more so that there is light in this cave, or which direction do you think you must go as you search for sunlight, are all the places where the mind is then searching for better answers, better way of looking at things. Yeah, so great. I'm at the edge of the pool, but I'm not jumping in. A similar to the earlier one. Yeah. So what's so attractive um, in the pool, or what will enable you to take that first step or jump into the pool? Yeah. What would enable you to take that jump? What is that you need to know so that you can jump? What would make you decide, yeah, perfect, perfect, absolutely, absolutely. This is beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. The last one. I want to fly like a bird. Pretty similar to the previous one again. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So go fly. are very nice, challenging invitations for the client to say what's coming in the way, what's the disabler. So beautiful way. Or, what would give you the power, to, what will empower the wings to fly also is one way. And of course, similar ones. So, and I'm sure you're using all of this. So this is, thank you for all your responses.
So, Alina, one question here. I work a lot with kids, and I'm saying kids, I'm talking about students and maybe school-going kids as well. And I've one thing that I've observed is that if you are very nice to them, at times it doesn't go anywhere. But instead, if you challenge them and say, it doesn't look like you can do that, then they will come around and say, no, I can do this, and it's kind of doing the reverse psychology or negative psychology. That work. Is there a space for it here, or is there a difference of working with metaphors in children versus adults?
No, not really. Not really. Maybe because children, and I don't know. I'm just passing a. Sorry, I am off video. Yeah, maybe I'm just passing a judgment. Yeah, based on how well do you know this child, you may want to explore this by saying, "Yeah, that's interesting. So, what makes you say that?" You know, and get the child to probably explain a little more on the mind state, and then explore that. But otherwise, there's generally the philosophy remains the same, that uh, the mind is in a confused state, and Mock is unable to make sense, and I need to move him to positive. I need to look at enablers. I need to make it powerful, and I do not want to ask any questions which is analyzing the metaphor. So when you say bird, what do you mean? And when you say fly, what do you mean? We don't want the critical thinker. We want a reflective thinker to come out in this conversation. So that's how it would be. Yeah. You know what, Nitin, you have the controls, right? So you may want to mute somebody who is probably not on mute. You have the control, so you can mute them. Somebody's not realized that they are not on mute. Yeah, I'm going to go back to sharing.
I guess everybody's on mute, and whenever I unmute myself, you are hearing a background from my side.
Okay. I'm sorry. No problem. So here we go. I'm going moving on to the next question that I have. Is that all this we are talking about where the client uses a metaphor? Is it possible that a coach introduces a metaphor? So your thoughts? Can a coach introduce a metaphor? So I have a response here. Absolutely, yes. Contextual. Why not? Yes. So not always is only for from a point of view of is the client. So again, a little bit of judgment here, but when you know that your client's learning style is very logic led, is not a very visual learner, uh, tends to be reflective less number of times, and does a logical analysis most of the time, looks at things in its most obvious format, then you may feel that a metaphor will also get analyzed. Then you may want to. But the best thing to do is to introduce and see. You will never know unless they don't, unless you don't introduce a metaphor. But otherwise, yes, you can introduce a metaphor. But the, the, the danger here is that you may be creating a mind state which is not what the client is in by putting in your own perception. Therefore, use very subtle metaphors. Very subtle. When I say subtle, you use the ones which are which doesn't take the mind into overly cognitive analysis. So something as simple as, okay, you seem to be wanting to, you sound like you want to fly like a bird, or flow like a river, or I feel that you are wearing a certain lens and you would want to change that lens. So don't use strong words, the river, the bird, the flying, and the flowing, and all those simple ones. And uh, as a coach, you may have a few of your favorite ones and then never go beyond them, because it may then add a new meaning to the story. And sometimes the clients just then pick up your metaphor only and start working on it without really taking the responsibility of their own thinking. And then you have kind of lost it. So yeah, like Jaya absolutely said, yes, there is a danger. Oh yeah, exactly, she's saying the same thing. Yeah, that that is not the mental map that is there, and suddenly you bring in. So present it tentatively. That's another rule here when you are talking of introducing a metaphor. When I say tentatively, you know how we all present an observation very tentatively: sounds like, looks like. So I'm not attached. If you say no, it's not a river, it's the sea, or it's a waterfall, I'm absolutely fine. So that's the way in which the the metaphor needs to be presented. Uh, because if you say something like, sounds like you feel stuck and your hands are tied and all that, which is a very strong metaphor, the client will say, no, actually the cage door is open. I can step out anytime, but I'm not stepping out. And then you're like, oh, okay. That's not what I have understood. So therefore, if you feel that may happen, then do not introduce. But otherwise, if there is to answer Rekha's, how will a coach introduce a metaphor to help the client? So when the client is telling the story, a lot of times clients are very anecdotal, in the sense he said, she said, then I said, then he did, then she did, and all that. And there are a lot of anecdotes coming in the story, and you as a coach are being careful not to get sucked into the drama of the story. You want to stay out, and you want to bottom line the client's experience. So we in Coachmasters Academy don't use feelings and those kind of things, because it's not always feelings. Sometimes it's thoughts, sometimes it's gut, sometimes it's doing. So we use the word experience. So you want to make sense of the client's experience, and you want to bottom line this entire 5-minute long dramatic story. So you bottom line by saying, sounds like you want to run, but kind of encountering a few roadblocks, as I hear you say them. And that's the one line bottom line. And you have introduced a metaphor of running freely and roadblocks. And then the client says, yes. And then you can say, yes, there are a lot of roadblocks, some big, some small, etc., etc. And where you have moved the client away from the drama of the story to move ahead. Yeah. So, does that answer your question, Rekha? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, to a certain extent. So let's see. Let me go ahead, and if your question is still not answered, Rekha, then we will address that again. Yeah. Let me now take you on to this next concept. So this was like a revision of metaphors and a different perspective to managing metaphors. Let's now move on to clean language. This is a concept which is not too old, somewhere in the 80s, 90s, by David Grove. He was a counselor, and he wanted to keep his assumptions out of the interaction with the clients as far as it was possible, so that he could work directly with the client's inner world. He wanted the clients to do do more work than he is doing. And in the sense that when the client gives a description, he wanted the client to relive the experience in his head. And he saw that very often coaches or therapists would distort the client's language, and it kind of robbed the client of his true experience. That's when he experimented that with a few questions that would lessen the risk, minimize the risk. And this he did by paying exquisite attention to the words, and then invite them through the words of the client, and then invite them to connect with their own experience. So help the client to construct meaning around their world. And that's when he devised the concept of clean language. So what is clean language? It's simply a set of very neutral questions using the client's words to direct attention to their own aspect of the experience. When these clean language questions are heard, people, as in your coaches, clients, find themselves thinking of a fresh perspective, something that they have never experienced before or never considered before. Yeah. I'm going to just show you a video. This is a pretty long video. That's one. So there's a caveat here, pretty long video. I'll stop at an appropriate time. Second is that this particular coach has used clean language to its complete extreme. He's like he's used it at the other end of the spectrum. But it's a pretty useful video. My idea of showing this to you is just to give you a preview or an introduction to how the clean language is used. So the only thing that I would request you to do is to kind of say, notice what is it what is surprising, and what are you noticing about the way the coach here is using this. Okay. Okay, someone wrote there that we cannot see or hear the video. So
That is correct. We are not able to see or hear the video. I think what you need to do is you need to share the screen instead of an application. And when you are sharing, there is a little checkbox on the left side which says share the
okay, but
audio.
you know what? I just did a check with Bobby before we started the session, and it was working. But still, I'll take your instructions. So first, I share screen. I
Hmm.
go on to my PPT.
No, no,
Okay.
not the applications. Are you sharing application or you're sharing screen?
At the moment, I'm sharing screen.
Okay. When you shared, did you? So can you get out of this slideshow mode?
Yeah. Yes.
No. So you were sharing application. Can you send me the link? I'll share with everybody. Send me the link on chat box. I'll share.
Okay. Give me 2 minutes. Is that a problem with everybody? Because okay, yeah, a lot of people are saying. I just checked it with Bobby, and he could hear the video. He could see everything. We did a. Okay, give me 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes. I'll do that right away.
You can share the video link on the chat box itself.
So I have sent it. So are you now putting it up?
Can everybody see my screen?
Well, that's what I was going to ask was if you could give us. Yeah, and well, that's what I was going to ask was.
Is everybody able to hear the video and see the video?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Was if you could give us an example of using clean questions, and I'd be happy to be a guinea pig if that would help our listeners to hear what a clean question sounds like and how it feels.
Well, that's a great idea. Okay, so all we need is something to start us off with. And I'll start you off with a standard clean language question, which is, what would you like to have happen?
I'd like to work on the stress levels that I feel about our business systems changing.
And you'd like to work on the stress levels that you feel about your business changing. And so when you'd like to work on those stress levels, what kind of levels are those levels?
Oh, they're elevated.
They're elevated. Ah. And is there anything else about the elevated of those levels?
They are stronger than I have had in business before.
Ah. So they're elevated levels that are stronger than what you've had in business before. And when those levels of stress are elevated and stronger than what you've had in business before, what would you like to have happen?
I would like to learn to manage my state.
So you'd like to learn to manage your state. And when you manage your state, what kind of manage is that manage?
A self-aware and self-healing manage.
Ah, a self-aware and self-healing manage. And is there anything else about that self-aware and self-healing?
It's quick and it doesn't require intervention from others.
Ah. And it's quick and doesn't require intervention from others. And when you're self-aware like that, where is that self-aware?
It is in my heart.
And you're self-aware in your heart. That's a quick self-aware that doesn't require intervention from others. And when you're self-aware in your heart like that, what kind of heart is self-aware like that?
Nitin, will you pause it now, or will you stop it now, please?
Hey,
Thank you. Thank you.
It's over to you now. You can share your screen now.
Yes, thank you so much, Nitin. Thank you for the help. Yes, so this is where we were. This is where we were. Anything that you noticed or anything that surprised you about this conversation? Repetition of everything that the client said, more of repeating the client's words. And what was other than the repeating of the client's words? Take the client deeper and deeper. There were typically two questions. I felt that the coach was speaking more, coach was paraphrasing. Okay, great. Yes, those are good observations. You very clearly noticed that the coach was only using the client's words and putting them back in the conversation, and yet you would have noticed that the client was giving answers and moving forward. The client was going into layers and layers of understanding his own thinking, and that's what uh, clean language is about. Let me explain this to you so that you can see what is the point. um, so clean language is it is not having a conversation. Yeah, so this is not a coaching conversation, it's a set of tools that you use in a coaching conversation to enable the client to discover more about their inner world. It's a guide to the clients to get into a self-reflective, mindful state of mind and focus on things that are, you know, that are out of the ordinary. Also, you would have noticed that it's not like an ordinary conversation, it's a grammatically awkward conversation, you know. And when you say elevated, what kind of elevated is that elevated? And that kind of sounds like, hello, what kind of a question is that? So it's deliberate. It's the way David Grove has designed this concept. This encourages the client to not engage cognitively or conversationally with you as a coach, not to interpret the meaning, but to look at that word. And that is how David Grove made this concept of clean language. So what is this clean language? Like I said, it's not a coaching conversation. It's a questioning and discussion technique specifically used for discovering, exploring, and working with people's own personal metaphors. They are used to find when a client is using a causal metaphor, that is, he's saying that is the cause of something that is happening to me, to reveal the hidden depths of the thought process. And the idea is to make the client pay attention back again to what he is saying. So one thing that we do ask is, what would this mean? This is a question that that is taught to us in our first few classes of our coach training. You know, you pick up a word and you say, what would that mean to you? When you say this, what does that mean to you? Sometimes the client goes into cognitive explanation of that. Whereas when you're using clean language, the client is redirected to kind of sit back and think, saying, what is it that's happening with me? And what is it that made me use that word? And why is it that we use the word clean when it is so awkward? In fact, it's not clean. Yeah. So clean in this question, according to David Grove, means that the question introduces fewer assumptions and imageries as possible. There is no other words except using the client's word and then prefixing and postfixing it with what kind of, or when you say, what would that, how elevated is that elevated, or etc., etc. Giving the client maximum freedom for their own thinking. Grover here discovered that the cleaner the questions are, the more effective is your coach's ability to develop the metaphor into a powerful resource for his personal awareness, for his understanding, and then for him to look for change. So what is the symbolic piece here? What is that you need to pay attention to? What we need to pay attention to is to move the client's mind out of the complex problem into a solution state and make him kind of imagine where is it that he is going on expressing, or what is it that he is saying. Uh, there's a lot of use of grammar here, or it is very useful if you are using your knowledge of grammar here. So when an adjective is used or when an adverb is used, those are the adjectives and the adverbs are great words for you to use in clean language. So I would like to manage this better. So manage is the verb and better is the adverb, which is describing the manage. Normally we would say, when you say manage, what would you mean? Because yeah, that's how we are. Here we are picking up better. I want to be I want to be more approachable. When you say approachable, what would that mean to you is normal questioning. And when you say more, what kind of more is that more? Or how is this more different from the earlier style that you have? So here in symbolic meaning stroke clean language, you're working with those words rather than the most obvious words. And therefore it is a lot more, how shall I say, higher level way of working with the client's metaphor. So let's look at a few syntaxes that are used when we are using clean language. So syntax number 1 for clean language. Suppose the client says, I want to build a reputation for myself. Yeah. There is nothing wrong if we say, when you say reputation, what is going on in your mind? What are you thinking? Which is a normal one. And here's a clean language way of looking at it, or a metaphor way of looking at it, where we identify that build is a metaphor or is a analogy. And there is a particular syntax. The syntax goes like this: and, which is your acknowledge. Then you say and when. So you are actually repeating and when. So you say and you want to build a reputation for yourself. And when you build a reputation for yourself, what kind of build is that build? So this is the syntax. You may want to note this down. And you repeat. You want to bring the client into the picture. So that is why the yourself here is underlined. Remember, we are telling the client, we're not coaching the situation, we're not coaching the stakeholders in the situation, we're only coaching the client. We're coaching the client to be able to change himself so that he can then manage the situation that he is in. And therefore, when you want to build a reputation for yourself, and when you build a reputation, what kind of build is that build? The word kind, according to David Grove and his linguistic studies, is the only word which does not get the mind into critical thinking and analyzing. What sort or what type, which is interchangeably used. Kind, sort, and type are interchangeably used words, but we do not use them here. We only use kind because kind lets you stay in a reflective mode. This may get you into logical, analytical, critical thinking. May I move ahead? One more tool for the clean language. Identify the attribute, like I was telling you. And the tip here when I say attribute is, like I said, the adjective or the adverb. So at the next level, instead of looking at what the client wants to do, let's see how the client is describing what he wants to do, how he wants to be. We are more paying attention to the client's state of being, obviously. So how he wants to be. And if you are able to pick up those adjectives and adverbs and then you use there, is there anything else about is also another way about picking up that adverb. I'd like to manage this situation a lot more efficiently. Sometimes you will want to use efficiently because again, ly, it's an adverb. And is there anything else about efficiently? That's another way of using. Third way is this one. That's dash like what? So like you saw in the example, that's elevated like what? That's meaningful like what? So I want to make this entire experience uh, meaningful for me, or meaningful for me and my organization, or whatever. And the obvious question is, when you say meaningful, what would that mean to you? Basic coaching question. That's meaningful like what is an invitation for the client to further expand his mind. And you will see that the client is giving you a much more layered answer. So, in terms of heightened awareness and deepened learning, this kind of clean language tool will help to heighten the awareness or deepen the learning. Because in Coach Masters Academy, we do not believe that there is a problem to be solved. We only believe that the client has something more to discover and something more to learn. Learn about himself, learn about the situation, learn about who he is, who he wants to be, who he is being, and what needs to change. And that learning and discovery is greatly enhanced when we use the clean language tool. So I'm just going to take a pause, and there's a chat here. So what will meaningful look like is, that's like I said, that this is another way in which you can do. Different clients will respond differently to what would meaningful look like, and there's nothing wrong with saying what would meaningful look like. Like I said, there are many ways of coaching.
No, I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand from the clean language perspective. When you're saying that's meaningful, like what is asking, in my mind at least, it is asking the same question as what will meaningful look like. Is there a difference from the clean language perspective?
No, that depends really on the answer that your client is giving. And we wouldn't know what is it like that makes the client go deeper. I believe that the clean language is a way in which the client really goes into exploring, expanding the mind, depths of, or heightening of awareness and deepening of learning. But nothing wrong in using that. What does meaningful look like? You will find opportunities where you feel that I may want to use it this way, or I may want to use it in the clean language way. That's a choice that you have. So this one is invitation to metaphor, where meaningful is the client is actually now going to say that meaningful like, and the client may then actually give you a metaphor, and then that's an opportunity for you to use that metaphor to further expand the mind, because you're actually converting it into a symbolic form. Here, this tool is just directing the client's attention to the words that are being used. So here's an example. So conventional coaching question, I want to move ahead seamlessly. What do you mean by seamlessly? I guess that's when there are no constant roadblocks and questions and objections. That's the client's answer when you use a straight, simple, conventional question. Whereas when you use a clean language coaching question, again, I want to move ahead seamlessly, move ahead seamlessly. And when you move seamlessly ahead, what kind of moving seamlessly does that moving seamlessly look like? Very awkward, but it gets the mind to think, what is this moving seamlessly? Everyone knows what to do, what to expect. Plans are in place. No surprises for anyone. Is there anything else about no surprises for anyone? Chances of the client giving you a little more information with, is there anything else about here, are more than what do you mean by no surprises for anyone. Try it and see, you will know. It works powerfully for me. It's a proven, oft used technique of clean language and metaphors. Here's another example. Syntax 2, which is there anything else about? So, and a picture that fills with tall buildings, heavy traffic, and me walking in full spirit. And when tall buildings, heavy traffic, many people, and walking in full spirit. Is there anything else about walking in full spirit? The client naturally will go to the depths of his mind when he says, what is this desire? This is the expression of desire, walking in full spirit. Walking in full spirit is the expression of desire. And in CMA, we use the client's expression of desire very beautifully because that's the window to be able to move the client to the state that he wants to go. It also moves him very quickly into what is the outcome of the conversation that he wants, if you are able to explore the expression of desire. Okay, so how much time do we have? We started at exactly at 7:30. So yeah, we have.
So we are past time. We are already at 8:30.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So I just had a few examples.
I will ask people to stay back. There is no issue.
No, I am. So I just had this one slide, which were examples. Depends on how long it takes. There's nothing more teachable or anything that I have to show. So I'm fine if we are.
No, I think you can continue. If people who are interested to stay back, they can stay back. But I understand the criticality. If somebody has a hard stop, if you want to move on, please go ahead.
Okay, then let me go back to my slide. So let's practice. I could spend my energies elsewhere. So first, let's pick up what out of this statement will you use what we call as the phrase that you will pick up, saying this is the attribute that I will use for my inquiry. So I could spend my energies elsewhere. Lots of words there.
You could respond in the chat box. So please feel free to do that. I would personally choose spend.
Okay. And how would you, okay, somebody has written here elsewhere. Yeah. So one participant says, I will use spend. Another says elsewhere. Elsewhere. So a coach judges whether the question that I ask is this one or that one. based on what is the intention of the question. Yeah, always as a coach, remember that what is it that I would like to get the client to reflect upon, and that's why I'm asking this question. So there is a purpose and there is an intention behind each question. So if you say um, suppose you say elsewhere, because two of you, Priya and Jill, have said elsewhere, how would you frame that inquiry? What kind of elsewhere is this elsewhere? Okay. Okay, Jill. And so my quick question to you is, what is the intention of this question?
I'll just unmute myself. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, Jill, sure.
Well, he's talking about something otherwise. So I'm wondering, where is that otherwise? So I want to spend my money, my energy somewhere else. Where is the somewhere else? What is that somewhere else?
And how will that help you to make him kind of expand his mind? Become more aware?
Well, he's not sharing where he wants to spend his energies. He doesn't know, or he's looking for it, or he also is not fully aware. So what kind of elsewhere? What is that elsewhere? Yeah, what kind of elsewhere? I don't know. I'm not sure, actually.
Okay. So I have a perspective here.
Sure.
Is that, and I totally respect your perspective. When I frame my question around elsewhere, I may be inviting the client to then give me facts of elsewhere. Like I could, paint, and I could go off on a holiday, or I could spend time with my child. This is what elsewhere is. So the chances are that elsewhere is going into what we call as critical thinking. We call it critical thinking versus reflective thinking, right? Critical thinking is about the logic of things. And the fact that the client is using elsewhere means the client knows that there are so many other options. And elsewhere is one of the options, one of the many options. Whereas I am interested in how the client is using symbolism here. And spending my energies is the symbolism that I am very interested in.
Makes sense.
So I would therefore say, is there anything else about spending my energies? So it's not just spending, it could be spending my energies.
It's interesting that I didn't pick up on the metaphor, and I just hooked onto that word.
Yes, it is an attractive word. It is. It is an attractive word, and that's what happens. So and in a coaching conversation, you don't have so much time to say, okay, if I ask this, what will happen? If I ask that, what will happen? Your mind has to really think fast, and therefore we kind of sometimes fall into a trap of asking a question which elicits a whole lot of data and facts, and then when the data starts coming in, you can say, oh my god, now how do I get him back into the reflective mode, because I've got him all logical and analytical in his mindset. And it's very tough then when the mind goes into an analytical state to pull him back to say, okay, be reflective, think deeper thoughts, please revisit your inner landscape. What is it that is missing in what you know? What is it that you need to understand more? That's the mindset of the coach. That's the searching that the coach is doing. The coach is constantly searching to say, what would make my client search inside? Yeah. Okay. Let's look at the second one. That's interesting. I want to speak my heart out to her. Yeah, speak my heart. Absolutely. Thankfully, there aren't any more this. I want to conquer this fear. So direct the client's chain of thought to something that is potentially unexplored. And how will you, Rekha, how would you frame the inquiry when you use fear?
I would probably ask, what is the fear that you are looking to conquer for yourself?
Okay. So, sure, you can use that. Mm, at certain seniority levels, coaches, I train my coaches to be able to work with negative emotions, but it's a little risky uh, to be able to work with the negative emotions and yet be able to pull the client out. Also, when the client goes into elaborate explanation of what is the fear, the client is going into a mind state with which you are trying to move him away from with great difficulty anyway. So I'm not saying that you ignore the fear, but is there anything that you can say to make him address the fear, but not elaborately articulate the fear?
Alina, here I have a question to you. As a coach, when we are looking at this kind of a question, that when we are looking to ask our client,
Yes.
are we not trying to move the client to our own direction that we want as a coach? Why shouldn't the client, when a client is saying such a negative metaphor or a sentence,
Yes.
rather than trying to move away our client from the negativity, I also sometimes, of course, it's a situational based call that, any coach that he or she would take. But I do not see any harm in asking, what is this fear all about that you're looking to conquer for yourself? If I'm looking at the same sentence or the metaphor here.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you, Rekha. What I'm trying to say is that in a conversation, when you invite the client to describe the pain, chances of you using up time to make him explain something which is not productive and meaningful in the purpose of the conversation, which is to move him out of this mind state. So a coach is always looking at working with something that is positive and possible. And as a coach, we believe that it is possible for him to overcome stroke conquer this fear. We believe that. And we are working with his mind to be able to say, how can he let this fear go? So why would you want to ask details about the fear? It is just, so that question is just filling in information for the coach on, so what kind of a fear is it? So if the client does say the fear, I have a catastrophic fear, I have a fear of rejection, I have a fear of people throwing stones at me being fired from my job, etc. That kind of a fear is the fear that I'm talking about. Then you're kind of stuck with, okay, now the fear has got expanded so much. Now do I have to deal with each one of them? One is thrown out of the job, another is being etc. And he's just kind of expanded. Whereas if you move his mind to say, I want to, the statement of I want to is one statement that every coach should really look out for. It's an indicator of coaching presence. I want to is, like I said, expression of desire. In fact, when I say I want to, as a coach, I hear a determination in the voice. Say, oh, you want to. Sounds like you are determining to conquer this fear. So the observation here is to observe that the client wants to. The client has an intention. And we work with the client's intention.
Another point of view, Rekha, is that fear is, so when client is saying this fear, chances are that he already know his fear. And when you're talking about expanding the mind, ask him to think about something else that he doesn't know yet.
Okay. So what's the symbolism here?
Conquer.
Yeah, that's the only symbolism here.
Yeah.
Conquer. So is conquer by so what kind of conquer is conquer? So symbolism is the symbol that he is using to express. Jill, this is to answer your question. The symbol that he is using to as an expression of his mind, right? Conquer. So the conquer could be anything from I will avoid this fear to I will take this fear head on to I will experiment with this fear to see that is it really a fear, real fear, or is it just in my head? It's all up to the client. We cannot direct that. Yeah. And we cannot have an agenda saying, I want him to conquer the fear. I want him to fight the fear. I want him to face the fear. We don't know. Just as a tip, Rekha, if you still feel, and I'm a great believer in a coach's intuition. In fact, one of the competencies also that the coach gives voice to his intuition. So if you feel that, this fear needs to be worked with, I can't ignore it. Rekha, this is for you.
Yeah.
I would say, and as you think about this fear, what do you want to do with it? Or what is this fear telling you? Those may be direct communication questions. Those may be questions which are, like you said, I completely understand the intention saying, boss, if this is what is a problem, why are you not addressing it? I totally understand. But I will not ask him to expand the fear. I would move him to say, what is this fear telling you? Most of the time, the answer is the fear is just in the head. It's not real. Or, I'm just imagining this fear. Or that I have to deal with this fear. I can't live with this fear. This can't go on. So what is this fear telling you? That may be one of the ways in case you feel that I want to. But otherwise, it would be conquer, because the client is using the word conquer and not face the fear or not overcome the fear, but conquer. And conquer is actually going on a conquest, a fight with the determination. And don't you want to tap that energy?
Okay.
Yeah, totally depending on what the context of the conversation. It's totally dependent on that.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Alina. Fantastic session. And even though clean language looks complex and sometimes confusing, I guess it could invoke a different direction of thinking. So thanks a lot for that point of view.
Yes.
I'm
at the end of our presentation. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I actually have a hard stop now. So if you have any questions, please send it out to us. The address of Bangalore chapter. I will also be uploading this video to a YouTube channel of Bangalore chapter. So you could ask your questions on the YouTube channel as well. Alina, you are most welcome to come and respond to the questions that are being asked.
Sure. I'd love it.
Okay, thanks a lot for making it a success. Wait for another announcement. It's going to happen in January, and it's going to be even more exciting, I can tell you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Good night.